Hi, I'm the woman my husband's family called trash. The day they disowned me at the family dinner, his mother sneered that I would amount to nothing, that I was beneath them. His father nodded in agreement while my husband sat silent, choosing his inheritance over defending me. They thought I had nothing to offer, but I never told them about the tech company I'd been quietly building for years, now valued at $67 million. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The evening air carried that distinct autumn chill that makes you reach for a sweater even when you're indoors. Through the bay windows of my in-laws' sprawling estate, I could see the last streaks of daylight fading over their meticulously manicured garden. The house smelled of roasted lamb and expensive wine, but there was a sourness I couldn't place. Maybe it was the tension hanging in the air, or maybe it was the way my mother-in-law's eyes narrowed every time I spoke. It had been a normal Sunday dinner until Richard, my husband of 3 years, mentioned that I might be leaving my accounting job to focus on that little website thing I'd been working on. I'd been developing a financial technology platform for small businesses for nearly 5 years, bootstrapping it myself, pouring every spare minute and dollar into building something I truly believed in. Another one of Emma's little projects. Eleanor, my mother-in-law, said with a dismissive wave of her hand. The crystal bracelet on her wrist caught the chandelier light as she reached for her wine glass. Darling, some of us need to stick to stable careers. Not everyone is built for success. My father-in-law, William, chuckled from the head of the table. The Bradford name opens doors, my boy, but your wife's background, well, it closes them just as quickly. I felt my cheeks flush, but kept my expression neutral. This wasn't the first time they'd made comments about my upbringing in a working-class neighborhood, my state school education, or my father, who worked with his hands for 40 years. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes fixed on the table. Not defending me, not again. His silence cut deeper than their words ever could. I've been meaning to tell you, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I've been approached by several investors who see potential in my platform. Eleanor laughed, the sound like glass breaking. Investors? In that little hobby of yours? Oh, Emma. No, your place. What Emma needs to understand, William added, leaning forward, is that some people are born to lead and others to follow. The Bradfords have built industries for generations. You, he pointed his fork at me, were lucky to marry into this family. Richard cleared his throat. Dad, come on. No, Richard, William cut him off. It's time someone told her. Your trust fund meeting is next month, $20 million. Do you really want to jeopardize that by encouraging her delusions of grandeur? The room fell silent. Richard's face paled. So that's what this was about, the trust fund he'd get on his 30th birthday, provided he was living up to the Bradford standards. Standards that apparently didn't include having a wife with ambitions. Eleanor placed her hand over mine in a gesture that might have looked comforting to an observer but felt like a trap. Emma, dear, there's no shame in being ordinary. You're pretty enough, and you make Richard happy in your way. But this entrepreneur fantasy? It's embarrassing for all of us. I withdrew my hand slowly. I should check on my prototype, I said, rising from the table. I've been testing some new features. Always with the excuses to look at her phone. Eleanor stage whispered to Richard, so unrefined. In the guest bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. Behind me, through the crack in the door, I could hear their voices continuing without me. She's trash, Richard, Eleanor hissed. I've tried to be patient. Your father's tried to mold her. But you can't polish coal into a diamond. Your mother's right, William's deeper voice added. The Bradford name means something in this city. We sit on boards. We fund hospitals. We shape policy. And you bring home someone who thinks a little app is the same as building a legacy? I should have been hurt. Maybe a part of me was. But something else was rising in me. a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I opened my phone and checked my latest user metrics. We'd crossed 50,000 active users last week. My development team had just solved our biggest technical hurdle. And this morning, I'd received an email from the largest venture capital firm in the country, expressing interest in leading our Series A funding round. None of them knew. Not even Richard. I'd kept my growing success quiet, partly out of humility, partly because I'd wanted to succeed or fail on my own terms. But now I realized there was another reason. Some small part of me had known this moment was coming. I texted my co-founder, Layla. "We're taking the VC meeting tomorrow. Prepare the full pitch deck." Her response came immediately. "Yes, I'll cancel my other appointments. This is it, Em." When I returned to the dining room, dessert was being served. An elaborate tiramisu that Eleanor prided herself on. The conversation had moved on to the charity gala the Bradfords were hosting next month. "Emma, you'll need a proper dress this time," Eleanor said without looking up. "I'll have my personal shopper find something that minimizes your flaws." Richard shifted in his seat but said nothing. "Actually," I said, taking a small bite of dessert, "I may not be able to attend. I have an important meeting that week," William scoffed. "More important than the governor? 3 senators will be there, for God's sake." I set down my fork. "It's with a venture capital firm. They're interested in my company." Eleanor's laugh was like broken glass. "Oh, sweetheart, those meetings happen all the time. They're courtesy calls. No one is actually going to fund your little, what is it again? Budget calculator? It's a comprehensive financial management platform for small businesses," I said, my voice level. "And they're discussing a $15 million investment." Richard's head snapped up. "15 million? Emma, you never told me." "She's lying," William interrupted. "No one would invest that kind of money in her." The words hung in the air like smoke. I felt something inside me harden into resolve. "Richard," I said, turning to my husband, "I'd like to go home now." The drive back to our apartment was silent. Richard gripped the steering wheel of his luxury sedan so tightly his knuckles were white. "You shouldn't antagonize them," he finally said as we pulled into our parking space. "They're just looking out for me. For us." "For you," I corrected, "not for us. Never for us." He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "The trust fund meeting is in 3 weeks. $20 million, Emma. We could buy that lake house you liked. Travel. Start a family. All you have to do is play along for a little while." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw for the first time how small he seemed in that moment. "And what would playing along look like to you?" "Just maybe put the business stuff on hold. Dress more like Mom suggested. Be more agreeable." "Agreeable," I repeated. The word tasted bitter. Inside our apartment, I went straight to my home office, the smallest bedroom that Richard had reluctantly let me convert. On my desk was a framed photo of my father in his electrician's uniform, arm around my mother who'd worked as a nurse for 30 years. Next to it sat my laptop, where I'd built the initial prototype of what was now becoming one of the fastest-growing fintech platforms in the country. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I opened my laptop and logged into our company dashboard. The metrics were even better than yesterday. User growth was exponential. Retention rates that most startups would kill for. And in my email, 3 more inquiries from investors who'd heard about our product. Richard appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with that charming smile that had once made my heart race. "Come to bed, Em. Forget about today. We can figure it all out tomorrow." But I couldn't forget. Something had shifted inside me, like tectonic plates finally settling into their true position. "I have an early meeting," I said. "You go ahead." After he left, I sent an email to my lawyer asking for an urgent appointment. Then I pulled up a document I'd been avoiding for months, a prenuptial agreement Richard's family had insisted upon, one I'd signed when I was still starry-eyed and believed that love conquered all. The next morning, I woke before dawn, dressed quietly, and slipped out of the apartment while Richard still slept. The city was just coming alive as I walked into my lawyer's office building, the early morning light giving everything a golden edge that felt symbolic somehow. Barbara had been my lawyer since I'd started my company. She was in her 50s, with sharp eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses and the kind of confidence that came from decades of watching powerful people underestimate her. "The prenup," she said when I placed it on her desk. "I wondered when we'd be having this conversation." "I need to understand exactly what it means for my company," I said. "What happens if Richard and I separate?" She finished when I couldn't. She adjusted her glasses and flipped through the document. "Well, it's ironclad in terms of protecting the Bradford family assets. But there's something interesting here." She pointed to a clause midway through. "This was meant to prevent you from claiming any part of his inheritance or family businesses. But the way it's written, it also means that any business you started independently remains entirely yours, even in the event of a divorce." "They were so concerned about protecting their money, they inadvertently protected mine," I said slowly. Barbara nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "They never imagined you'd have anything worth protecting." I left her office with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. My phone buzzed with a text from Layla. "Just got out of the preliminary call with the VCs. They want to move fast. Meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. "This is happening, Em!" Instead of going home, I went to our company's small office space, where my team of 12 was already hard at work. They looked up when I entered, faces bright with a mixture of exhaustion and excitement. These were people who'd believed in my vision when it was nothing but wireframes and hopeful projections. "I heard about the VC meeting," said Marco, our lead developer. "Are we really looking at 15 million? "Potentially more," I replied. "They've seen our growth metrics." The room erupted in cheers. Someone popped a bottle of cheap champagne we'd been saving. As paper cups were passed around, I felt my phone vibrate repeatedly in my pocket. Richard, wondering where I was. His mother, probably calling to continue last night's campaign of diminishment. I silenced it and raised my cup. "To all of you who saw what was possible when everyone else saw a pipe dream." That evening, I finally returned home to find Richard pacing our living room, his face flushed with anger. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "I've been calling all day. My mother tried to reach you about the gown fitting." "I was working," I said simply. "And I won't be attending the gala." He stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. "Of course you're attending. The whole family will be there. Dad's receiving an award." "Richard," I said, setting down my bag, "I'm meeting with investors tomorrow morning. If it goes well, we'll be valued at over $60 million. My company, the one your family has been mocking for years, could be worth more than your entire trust fund by the end of the month." He blinked rapidly, processing this. $60 million? That's incredible. Why didn't you tell me? We? I interrupted. "There is no we in this company, Richard. I built it. Me. The same woman your mother called trash last night while you sat there and said nothing." His face fell. "They don't mean it, Emma. It's just their way. They're old-fashioned." "They meant every word," I said quietly. "And your silence meant you agree." "That's not fair. I'm caught in the middle here." "There is no middle," I said. "There's right and there's wrong. And last night made it very clear where everyone stands." I walked to our bedroom and pulled out a suitcase. Richard followed, his voice rising in panic. "What are you doing? Emma, stop! Think about what you're throwing away." I continued packing methodically. "I've been thinking about it for a long time. Last night just made the decision clearer." "The trust fund meeting is in 3 weeks," he pleaded. Just wait until after that. We'll figure it out." I zipped the suitcase closed and looked at him. In that moment, I saw him clearly, not the charming man I'd fallen in love with, but someone whose strength and values were borrowed from a family name. "I hope you get your money, Richard. I really do. It seems to be the only thing that matters to you." I called a car service and booked a hotel room while he continued to argue, his words becoming increasingly desperate. When the car arrived, he followed me to the door. "My parents were right about one thing," he said, his voice cold now. "You don't belong in our world. You never did." I paused, my hand on the doorknob. "No, I don't belong in your world. I'm building my own. The hotel room was simple but clean, with a view of the city skyline that somehow felt symbolic, like I could see possibilities stretching out before me. I laid out my presentation materials for tomorrow's meeting and rehearsed my pitch one more time. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Eleanor. Richard told us about your tantrum. Remember your place, girl. Without the Bradford name, you're nothing. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned my attention to preparing for the meeting that would change everything. The next morning, I arrived at the venture capital firm's offices 15 minutes early, my presentation polished, my confidence steady. Layla met me in the lobby, her eyes wide with excitement. They brought in their entire leadership team, she whispered. That never happens for a first meeting. We were shown into a conference room where 8 people in expensive suits sat waiting. I recognized Jonas Whitman, the firm's founding partner, a legend in the investment world who is known for backing unicorn startups before anyone else saw their potential. Ms. Carter, he said, extending his hand, your metrics are extraordinary. Show us why we should believe they'll continue. For the next hour, I walked them through our platform, our growth strategy, and our vision for the future. I answered their pointed questions with data and clarity. When we finished, Jonas leaned forward. We've seen a lot of fintech solutions, he said slowly. But yours solves a real problem in a way no one else has figured out. We're prepared to offer $20 million at a $67 million valuation today. The room seemed to hold its breath. This was more than we'd hoped for, more than I'd dreamed possible when I'd started building this in my spare time years ago. We'll need to review the terms, I said, maintaining my composure though my heart was racing. Of course, Jonas replied, but we'd like to move quickly. The market needs this solution. As we were leaving, Jonas walked me to the elevator. I have to ask, he said quietly, why haven't I heard of you before? Someone building something this impressive usually makes noise. I thought about the dinners at the Bradford house, the dismissive comments, the condescension. I wanted the product to speak for itself, I said. He nodded approvingly. It does, loudly. When I returned to the hotel, there were 6 missed calls from Richard and a text that simply read, "We need to talk. Please." I ignored them all and called my father instead. He answered on the second ring, the sounds of his workshop audible in the background. Hey, sweetheart. Everything okay? You don't usually call this time of day. Everything's better than okay, Dad, I said, my voice finally breaking with emotion. Remember that idea I had 3 years ago? The one you helped me sketch out on napkins at the kitchen table? Your money program for small shops? Sure I do. Someone just valued it at $67 million. The sound of tools being set down. A long silence. Then his voice, thick with emotion. I always knew you were building something special, Em. Always knew it. After the meeting, the cab ride back to the hotel felt surreal. The driver caught my eye in the rearview mirror and smiled. Good news! You're glowing. I realized I was smiling so wide my cheeks hurt. Life-changing news, I said, and meant it. Back in my hotel room, I kicked off my heels and sat cross-legged on the bed, opening my laptop to send the team an update. The response was immediate. A flurry of excited messages, gifs of celebration, and one voice note from Marco that was just unintelligible happy screaming. My phone buzzed again with Richard's name. I hesitated, then answered. Emma, thank God, he said, his voice tight with tension. We need to talk. My parents are furious. They're saying you've embarrassed the family by walking out. I gazed out the window at the skyline, at a city that suddenly felt full of possibility. Richard, I just closed a $20 million funding round. My company is now valued at $67 million. Silence. Then, that's incredible. Does this mean you're coming home? We can tell my parents together. They'll have to respect you now. The words hit me like a physical blow. Respect me now, as if my worth had suddenly changed because of a dollar amount. I'm not coming home, I said quietly. I've filed for separation. What? Emma, you can't be serious. The trust fund meeting is in 3 weeks. Everything we've worked for. Everything your family has worked for, I corrected. This was never about us, Richard. It was about maintaining the Bradford legacy. I was just an accessory that didn't quite match. That's not fair, he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Tell your mother I won't be needing that gown after all, I said, and ended the call. That night, I met Layla and the team for dinner. We toasted with champagne that didn't come in paper cups this time. As we celebrated, I found myself thinking about my father's hands, calloused from decades of electrical work, but so gentle when he'd helped me build my first computer at age 12. To seeing what others miss, I said, raising my glass one final time. By morning, the news of our funding had spread through industry channels. My inbox was flooded with congratulatory messages, including several from former colleagues who'd once dismissed my idea as quote. The satisfaction of those messages paled in comparison to the email from Barbara, my lawyer, confirming she'd filed the separation papers. Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into scaling the company. We leased a proper office space, hired key positions, and refined our product roadmap. I barely noticed the stream of increasingly desperate messages from Richard until one caught my eye. My father wants to meet. Just you and him. Please, Emma. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet William Bradford at his private club. One of those old money establishments with dark wood paneling and portraits of stern-faced men lining the walls. I wore my most professional outfit, a tailored navy suit that made me feel armored. The maitre d' led me to a secluded table where William sat alone, nursing what looked like expensive scotch. He didn't stand when I approached. Emma, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Thank you for coming. I sat, declining his offer of a drink. What can I do for you, William? He studied me for a moment, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. I understand congratulations are in order. Richard told me about your business success. The way he said business success made it sound like a dubious achievement. Thank you, I replied simply. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Let me be direct. Richard's trust fund meeting is next week. $20 million that could secure both your futures. I understand you filed for separation. I have. He nodded slowly. I'm prepared to make you an offer. Return home, attend the gala, play the part of the dutiful Bradford wife for 1 more month. After Richard receives his inheritance, you can proceed with whatever divorce terms you wish. I'll even ensure you receive a generous settlement. I felt a strange calm settle over me. So you want me to pretend our marriage isn't over so Richard doesn't lose his trust fund? I want what's best for my son, he said firmly. And for the Bradford name. The Bradford name, I repeated. The one you told me I was tarnishing by existing. He had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. Perhaps Eleanor and I were harsh in our assessment. We didn't know about your business acumen. You didn't bother to find out, I corrected. You saw where I came from and decided that was all I would ever be. William sighed, impatience edging into his voice. The past is irrelevant. I'm offering you a straightforward business transaction. 1 month of your time in exchange for financial security. I stood, smoothing my jacket. I built financial security for myself, William. I don't need yours. And I certainly don't need the approval of people who called me trash while my husband sat in silence. His face hardened. You'll regret this, Emma. The Bradford family has connections throughout this city. One word from me could... Could what? I interrupted. Close doors? Create obstacles? I've been facing those my entire life. The difference is, now I have 67 million reasons not to care. I left him sitting there, his scotch untouched. Outside, rain had started to fall. Gentle at first, but quickly becoming a downpour. I stood under the awning of the club, watching sheets of water transform the city streets into rippling mirrors. A text from Richard lit up my phone. What did you say to my father? He's furious. I didn't respond. Instead, I stepped into the rain, letting it wash over me as I walked toward the future I was building for myself. The next morning, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was Elizabeth, Richard's younger sister. We'd always gotten along better than I had with the rest of the family. Perhaps because at 25 she was just starting to question the Bradford way of life. "Emma," she said when I answered, "is it true? About your company?" "It's true," I confirmed. "And you're really leaving Richard?" "Yes." A long pause. "Good for you," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're all in crisis mode here. Dad's making calls to try to block your funding somehow. Mom's telling everyone you had some kind of mental breakdown." "And Richard?" "Mostly worried about the trust fund," she admitted, "though he keeps saying he loves you." "But not enough to stand up for me," I said softly. "No," she agreed. "Not enough for that." After we hung up, I called Jonas at the venture capital firm. "I should warn you," I said. "William Bradford might try to interfere with our deal." Jonas laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "William Bradford is old money, old connections. We're new money. Trust me, his influence doesn't extend to Silicon Valley capital." True to his word, our funding was secured the following day. I signed the final paperwork in the new office, surrounded by my team. As the last signature dried, I thought about how different this moment felt from signing my prenuptial agreement years ago, that had felt like shrinking myself to fit someone else's expectations. This felt like expansion. 3 days later, I received formal notice that Richard's family was contesting our separation on grounds that were both flimsy and insulting. Barbara called to explain. "They're claiming you concealed assets," she said. "That you deliberately misled Richard about the value of your company to deprive him of his marital share. But the prenup protects you completely," she assured me. "This isn't about winning. It's about dragging you into court, making it public, embarrassing you. Classic intimidation tactic." "When is the hearing?" I asked. "Next week. Same day as the Bradford Gala, conveniently enough." I couldn't help but laugh at the pettiness of it all. "They think I'll back down to avoid a court appearance? They don't know you very well, do they?" Barbara said, a smile in her voice. The morning of the hearing, I dressed with purpose. A sleek charcoal suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a simple knot. Professional, confident, unapologetic. Layla met me outside the courthouse, giving me a fierce hug before we walked in together. "The whole team wanted to come," she said. I told them we'd have a proper celebration after. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, with wood-paneled walls and uncomfortable-looking benches. Richard was already there with his parents and their lawyer, all 3 Bradfords in coordinating navy blue, like they were posing for a family portrait. Eleanor's eyes widened slightly when she saw me. I wondered if she'd expected me to look diminished somehow, broken by their tactics. Richard couldn't quite meet my gaze. Our case was called third. As we approached the front of the courtroom, I noticed a subtle shift in the judge's expression when the Bradford name was announced. Recognition, certainly, but not the automatic deference they were accustomed to. The Bradford lawyers spoke first, outlining their claim that I had craftily concealed the true value of my business during the marriage, depriving Richard of his rightful share according to state law. When Barbara rose to speak, her confidence filled the room. "Your Honor, before we proceed, I'd like to direct the court's attention to Exhibit A, the prenuptial agreement signed by both parties, which clearly states that any business venture started independently by either party remains the sole property of that party in the event of separation." She handed copies to the judge and opposing counsel. Additionally, I'd like to note that Mrs. Bradford's company was not only disclosed to her husband throughout their marriage, but was repeatedly dismissed and belittled by him and his family, as evidenced by these text messages and emails. The judge reviewed the documents, his expression unreadable. Then he looked up, focusing on Richard. "Mr. Bradford, were you aware of your wife's business activities during your marriage?" Richard shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, Your Honor, but I didn't know it was worth anything significant." "Because you never asked," the judge noted, not a question but an observation. "And the prenuptial agreement your family insisted upon effectively waived any claim to her business assets, just as she waived claim to your family's considerable holdings." William Bradford leaned forward, whispering urgently to their lawyer, who cleared his throat. Your Honor, we contend that Mrs. Bradford deliberately misled. I've seen enough, the judge interrupted. The prenuptial agreement is clear and enforceable. Mrs. Bradford's company remains her sole property. Furthermore, he added, peering over his glasses, I find this motion frivolous and potentially vexatious. The separation will proceed as filed. As the judge continued, outlining the terms of our separation, I watched the Bradford family's composure crumble in real time. Eleanor's face flushed with anger. William's jaw clenched so tightly I could see a muscle twitching in his cheek. And Richard looked lost, like a man who'd just realized he'd made a terrible mistake. After the judge dismissed us, Barbara shook my hand with a satisfied smile. Congratulations, you're officially separated with all your assets intact. As we turned to leave, Williams stepped into my path. This isn't over, he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. The Bradford name still means something in this city. I met his gaze steadily. I'm sure it does. But my name means something too now. The difference is, I built my reputation myself. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun was bright enough to make me squint. Reporters had gathered on the steps. News of a tech startup's massive valuation combined with a high society separation was too juicy to ignore. Mrs. Bradford, one called out. Can you comment on the judge's ruling? Before I could answer, I heard Richard's voice behind me. Emma, wait. I turned to see him standing alone, his parents nowhere in sight. For a moment, he looked like the man I'd fallen in love with years ago, before I'd watched him shrink himself to fit his family's expectations. I'm sorry, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I should have stood up for you. I should have seen what you were building. There was a time when those words would have meant everything to me. Now they felt like too little, far too late. I hope you get your trust fund, Richard, I said gently. I hope it gives you what you're looking for. As I walked down the courthouse steps with Layla by my side, the reporters called out again. This time I stopped. My name is Emma Carter, I said clearly. Not Bradford. I'm the founder and CEO of FinStep, a company now valued at $67 million. And I built it from nothing, while being told repeatedly that I would amount to nothing. The cameras flashed as I continued. To every person who's been underestimated, dismissed, or called trash because of where they came from rather than where they're going, keep building. Success is the best answer to those who doubt you. That evening, while the Bradford Gala proceeded without me, I sat in my new apartment with my father. He'd flown in as soon as he'd heard about the court date, bringing with him my mother's old recipe box and enough lasagna to feed my entire team. I always knew you were meant for big things, Emma, he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Your mother knew it too. I thought about the journey, from sketching ideas at my parents' kitchen table, to being dismissed by the Bradfords, to walking out of that courtroom with my head held high. The funny thing is, I said, I never needed their approval, I just thought I did. My father nodded, understanding in his eyes. Some people measure worth by last names and trust funds. Others measure it by what you build with your own two hands. My phone buzzed with a text from Elizabeth. They're all pretending everything's fine at the gala, but Dad keeps drinking scotch like it's water. And Richard looks miserable in the family photos. I told them I'm starting my own company next year. Mom nearly fainted. I smiled, picturing the scene. Then I put my phone away and turned back to my father, to the quiet evening we were sharing, to the life I was choosing for myself. 3 months later, I stood on a stage at a major tech conference, preparing to unveil FinStep's newest platform. In the front row sat my team, now 30 strong and growing. Jonas, from the venture capital firm, gave me a thumbs up from the side of the stage. As I adjusted the microphone, I caught sight of a familiar face slipping into the back row. Elizabeth Bradford, notepad in hand, gave me a small wave and an encouraging smile. 5 years ago, I began, I started building a solution to a problem no one seemed to care about. How small businesses, family operations, and first-generation entrepreneurs struggle with financial management tools designed for corporations. The audience nodded, many of them small business owners themselves. I was told repeatedly that my idea was too small, too niche, not worth pursuing, that I should know my place and leave innovation to those who were born for it. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces, but I knew something they didn't. I knew that the most powerful innovations often come from the people who've experienced the problem firsthand. People who weren't born into privilege but had to create their own opportunities. As I demonstrated our platform, showing how it was already helping thousands of small businesses manage their finances with tools previously available only to major corporations, I thought about how far I'd come. Not just in terms of success or validation, but in understanding my own worth, a worth that had never depended on the Bradford name or approval. After the presentation, during the networking reception, Elizabeth approached me with a warm hug. "That was incredible," she said. "I've been working on my own business plan. I was hoping maybe you could look at it sometime." "I'd be honored," I told her. "They miss you, you know," she said hesitantly. "Richard, most of all. He got his trust fund, but he looks miserable. Dad's still furious, but Mom started telling everyone she always saw your potential." I laughed softly. "Rewrites history in her favor, doesn't she?" Elizabeth nodded, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Always has." As we parted ways, I felt a strange sense of peace. The Bradfords had once seemed like giants in my life, their approval the measure of my success. Now they seemed smaller somehow, trapped in their own narrow definition of worth. I walked out of the conference center into the bright afternoon, my phone already buzzing with congratulatory messages and meeting requests. Across the street, I spotted a small cafe where a young woman sat alone, working intently on a laptop plastered with stickers. Something about her reminded me of myself years ago. The determination, the focus, the hunger to build something meaningful. In that moment, I made a decision. The next phase of FinStep would include a foundation, one dedicated to funding women entrepreneurs from backgrounds like mine. Not a handout, but a hand up. A way to say, your ideas matter, your voice matters, your background is not a limitation, but a source of unique insight. As I walked toward my car, I thought about the words my father had repeated throughout my childhood whenever I faced a setback. "Remember who you are, Emma, not who they say you are." I'd finally learned the difference. 6 months after the court hearing, I stood in the doorway of FinStep's new headquarters, watching my team settle into a space that finally matched our ambitions. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, the open floor plan hummed with energy, and the conference rooms, named after pioneering women in technology, were already filled with collaborative sessions. "What do you think?" Layla asked, appearing beside me with 2 cups of coffee. I accepted one gratefully. "It's everything we dreamed about in that tiny office." "And then some," she agreed. "Did you see the article this morning?" I had. The Business Journal had featured FinStep in their Companies to Watch issue, highlighting our exponential growth and the foundation we'd recently launched to support women entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds. "The Emma Carter Foundation," Layla said, nudging me playfully. "Still feels surreal to see your name out there like that." I smiled, remembering how I'd once hesitated to use my maiden name professionally, worried about what the Bradfords might think. Now Carter was becoming a name associated with innovation and opportunity. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Just landed. Dinner still on for 7?" My parents were visiting for the weekend to see the new office and attend tomorrow's foundation launch event. My mother had sewn the dress I'd be wearing, a gesture that brought tears to my eyes when she'd first shown it to me. As I texted back a confirmation, an email notification appeared from a name I hadn't expected to see: Richard Bradford. "Everything okay?" Layla asked, noticing my expression. "Just an email from Richard," I said. "First time I've heard from him since the hearing." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you going to read it?" "Later," I decided, pocketing my phone. "Right now, we have a company to run." The day flew by in a blur of meetings, decisions, and excited conversations about our expanding user base. By late afternoon, I finally had a moment alone in my office. A bright corner space with minimal decoration except for three things. A framed photo of my parents, the first dollar we'd ever earned from FinStep, and a small cactus Elizabeth had given me as a housewarming gift when I'd moved into my new apartment. I sat at my desk and opened Richard's email. Emma, I've started this email 100 times over the past months. Nothing I write seems adequate, but I'm trying anyway. I saw the article about your foundation. It's remarkable what you've built, what you're continuing to build. I always knew you were talented, but I failed to truly see you. My family is still processing everything. Father rarely mentions your name, though I catch him reading articles about FinStep when he thinks no one is looking. Mother has rewritten history in typical Eleanor fashion. Now she claims she always saw your potential and was simply testing your resolve. Elizabeth has become your biggest champion at family dinners, much to everyone's discomfort. As for me, I received the trust fund. The family business continues. From the outside, everything looks the same, but nothing feels the same. I'm writing because I heard through Elizabeth that your foundation launches tomorrow night. I don't expect an invitation, I don't deserve one, but I wanted you to know that I'm proud of what you've accomplished, and I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to stand beside you when it mattered. Richard, I sat back, absorbing his words. There was a time when an apology from Richard would have meant everything. Now it felt like a message from a different life, one I'd outgrown. I closed the email without responding and left the office to meet my parents for dinner. The restaurant was one of my favorites. A family-owned Italian place where the owner, Maria, greeted customers with genuine warmth rather than practiced hospitality. My parents were already seated when I arrived, my father rising to give me a bear hug that smelled of his familiar aftershave. There she is, he said proudly, the big CEO. My mother embraced me next, her eyes already misty. The office looks beautiful, honey. We peeked through the windows on our way to the hotel. We settled into dinner, the conversation flowing easily between company updates, neighborhood gossip from back home, and my mother's detailed description of every stitch in the dress she'd made for tomorrow's event. I used that midnight blue fabric you loved as a girl, she explained. Remember how you said it looked like the sky just before the stars come out? I nodded, touched that she'd remembered. It's perfect, Mom. Thank you. My father cleared his throat, a sign he was preparing to say something significant. Your mother and I have been talking, he began, about the foundation. I'd invited them to serve on the board, but they'd been hesitant, worried they didn't have the right experience or connections. We'd like to accept those board positions, he continued. If you still want us. Of course I want you, I said immediately. No one understands the mission better than you do. My mother reached across the table to squeeze my hand. We're so proud of you, Emma. Not just for the success, but for how you've handled everything. With grace and dignity. And a healthy dose of stubbornness, my father added with a wink. We laughed, and I felt that familiar surge of gratitude for these two people who had given me roots strong enough to weather any storm. After dinner, walking back to my apartment under a clear night sky, I found myself thinking about Richard's email again. Not with longing or regret, but with a kind of peaceful clarity. The Bradfords had once seemed like gatekeepers to a world I thought I wanted to join. Now I understood I had been building something better all along. The next morning dawned bright and crisp, perfect weather for the foundation launch event we'd planned on the rooftop garden of our new building. I arrived early to oversee the final preparations, watching as the space transformed with elegant signage, subtle lighting, and rows of chairs facing a small stage. Nervous? Layla asked, joining me for our final walkthrough. A little, I admitted. This feels different from our business launches, more personal. She nodded understandingly. Because it is. This is your legacy, Emma. Not just helping businesses manage money, but making sure other women like you get their shot. By 6 o'clock, guests began arriving. Investors, mentors, the first cohort of women entrepreneurs we'd be supporting, and key figures from the business community. My parents greeted everyone with genuine enthusiasm, my father's charisma and my mother's warmth, making them natural ambassadors for our mission. I was speaking with a reporter when I noticed a familiar figure by the entrance, Elizabeth Bradford, looking elegant, but slightly uncertain, as if not sure she belonged. Excuse me? I said to the reporter. Making my way through the crowd, Elizabeth's face brightened when she saw me. Emma, I hope it's okay that I came. The invitation said +1, and I thought, of course it's okay, I assured her, giving her a warm hug. I'm glad you're here. She pulled back, something hesitant in her expression. There's something I should tell you. Richard knows I'm here. My smile faltered slightly. Did he send you to deliver another apology? No, she said quickly. He asked me to really look at what you've built, to understand it. I think he's trying to understand it himself. Before I could respond, a staff member signaled that it was time for the program to begin. I squeezed Elizabeth's hand. We'll talk more later. Taking the stage, I looked out at the gathered faces. Some familiar, some new, all united by a belief in the mission we were launching tonight. My parents sat in the front row, pride radiating from them like physical warmth. Welcome to the official launch of the Emma Carter Foundation. I began. Many of you know me as the founder of FinStep, but tonight isn't about that company. It's about creating opportunities for women who, like me, come from backgrounds where access to capital, mentorship, and networks are limited. As I spoke about our vision to fund and support women entrepreneurs from working-class backgrounds, I found myself thinking about the journey that had led me here. Not just the professional milestones, but the personal ones. The moments of doubt, the painful dismissals, and ultimately, the decision to value myself even when others didn't. This foundation was born from a simple truth. I learned the hard way, I continued. Your worth isn't determined by your last name, your zip code, or who validates your ambitions. It's determined by what you build, how you persevere, and the impact you create. After my speech, as the evening transitioned to the networking portion, I found myself surrounded by women eager to share their stories, their businesses, their challenges, their dreams. Each conversation reinforced the importance of what we were building. Later, as the crowd thinned, I found Elizabeth by the rooftop edge, gazing out at the city lights. It's beautiful up here, she said as I joined her. You can see everything. That was the point, I admitted. I wanted a space where we could look out and remember how much possibility is out there. She turned to face me, her expression serious. I'm leaving the family business. I've accepted a position with a tech incubator in Austin. Elizabeth, that's wonderful, I said, genuinely happy for her. When do you start? Next month. Father's furious, of course. Says I'm throwing away my birthright. She laughed softly. Maybe I am. But after watching you build something that matters to you, I realized I want the same thing. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment before she spoke again. Richard asked me something else. He wanted to know if you're happy. The question caught me off guard. Was I happy? I looked around at the event we'd created, thought about the foundation taking shape, the company growing beyond my initial vision, the life I was building on my own terms. Yes, I said simply. I am. Elizabeth nodded, as if confirming something to herself. I'll tell him. As the event wound down, my parents helped the staff with cleanup, insisting they wanted to contribute despite my protests. Watching my father stack chairs while enthusiastically chatting with one of our developers about coding boot camps, I felt a rush of affection so strong it nearly overwhelmed me. Back at my apartment later that night, I kicked off my heels and sat on the balcony with a cup of tea, replaying the evening in my mind. My phone buzzed with a text from Layla. We just hit 100,000 users? Celebration brunch tomorrow? I smiled, typing back a quick agreement. Then, making a decision, I opened Richard's email from yesterday and began to compose a response. Richard, thank you for your email. The foundation launched tonight, and it was everything I hoped it would be. Elizabeth attended. She may have already told you. She's taking a brave step with her career move, and I'm proud of her. I've thought about what to say to you for months. The truth is, I don't regret our separation. It was necessary for both of us. What happened with your family was painful, But it also pushed me to fully embrace what I was building without apology or hesitation. You asked, Elizabeth, if I'm happy. I am. Not because of the company's valuation or the press coverage, but because I finally understand my own worth isn't tied to anyone else's approval, not even yours. I hope you find your own path, Richard. One that brings you the same clarity. Emma? I sent the email, then set my phone aside, looking out at the city spread before me like a constellation of possibilities. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new growth. Tonight, I would simply savor how far I'd come. The following week, I was in the middle of a strategy meeting when my assistant knocked on the conference room door. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, but there's someone here to see you, Eleanor Bradford. The room fell silent. Layla's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Tell her I'm in a meeting, I said, trying to mask my shock. I can speak with her in 30 minutes. After the team filed out, I sat alone, gathering my thoughts. Eleanor Bradford, showing up, unannounced, at my office. The woman who had called me trash, who had dismissed every effort I'd made to fit into her world. What could she possibly want? 30 minutes later, I walked into my office to find Eleanor perched on the edge of a chair, looking uncomfortable and out of place. She'd aged somehow in the months since I'd last seen her. Not physically, but something in her bearing had changed. Emma, she said, rising when I entered. Thank you for seeing me. This is unexpected, I replied, keeping my tone neutral as I sat behind my desk. She remained standing, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. I imagine it is. I won't take much of your time. I came to apologize. The words seemed to cost her physical effort. Eleanor Bradford had probably never apologized to anyone in her life. William doesn't know I'm here, she continued when I didn't immediately respond. He wouldn't approve. But after Elizabeth left, she paused, visibly composing herself. She said some things before she left. About how we treated you. About what we missed because we couldn't see past our own preconceptions. I watched her, this woman who had once seemed so intimidating, now struggling to find the right words. You've built something remarkable, she said finally. Something that helps people. And we were wrong about you. I was wrong about you. For a moment, I thought about all the cutting responses I could offer. How her approval meant nothing to me now. How her change of heart came only after my success was undeniable. But looking at her, I felt something unexpected. Compassion. Eleanor Bradford was a product of her world, just as I had been of mine. The difference was, I had found the courage to expand beyond those boundaries. Thank you for coming, Eleanor, I said simply. I appreciate your apology. She nodded, then reached into her purse and withdrew an envelope. There's something else. The Bradford Foundation would like to make a donation to your foundation. For your first round of entrepreneurs. She placed the envelope on my desk. It's not about buying forgiveness. It's about recognizing value where we failed to see it before. After she left, I opened the envelope to find a check for $1 million and a handwritten note, for women who deserve to be seen. E.B. I sat back in my chair, processing what had just happened. Not forgiveness, perhaps, but something like closure. That evening, I met with the selection committee for our first cohort of entrepreneurs. 10 women from backgrounds similar to mine. Daughters of factory workers, service employees, immigrants, each with an idea that could change their industries if given the chance. As we reviewed their applications, I thought about Eleanor's donation and what it represented, not just money but acknowledgement, recognition. One application particularly caught my attention. A young woman named Sonia, who developed a healthcare communication platform while caring for her grandmother. Her pitch was brilliant, her market research thorough, but she'd never had access to the networks that could help her scale. This is exactly why we started the foundation, I told the committee. To find women like Sonia and give them the resources they need to succeed. After the meeting, I walked home instead of taking a car, enjoying the crisp evening air and the sense of purpose that had become my constant companion. My phone rang with a call from Elizabeth, now settled in Austin and thriving in her new role. You'll never guess who visited me today. she said when I answered. Richard. Richard? I repeated, surprised. In Austin? He flew in this morning, said he needed to talk in person. She paused. He's leaving the family business, Emma. Starting his own venture. Something about sustainable housing solutions. I stopped walking, absorbing this news. What did your father say? About what you'd expect. Threatened to cut him off completely. But Richard seems different. More certain of himself. After we hung up, I continued my walk, thinking about Richard forging his own path after all these years. Perhaps my leaving had created ripples I hadn't anticipated, challenging not just how the Bradfords saw me, but how they saw themselves. The next morning, I arrived at the office early to find a package waiting on my desk. Inside was a small wooden box, beautifully crafted with a note from my father. For keeping those big ideas safe. Love, Dad. I opened it to find a miniature version of his workshop toolbox, each compartment lined with velvet and perfectly sized for office supplies. It was whimsical and practical, just like him. As I placed it on my desk, Layla appeared in the doorway with coffee and news about our latest product launch. The day began its familiar rhythm: meetings, decisions, the constant forward motion of building something that mattered. That evening, as I prepared for a dinner with our first cohort of entrepreneurs, I received a text from an unknown number. Congratulations on everything you've built. You were right about finding your own path. I'm trying to find mine now. Richard? I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I finished getting ready, choosing a pair of earrings my mother had given me for my college graduation. Simple silver stars that reminded me of dreams and possibilities. On my way to the restaurant, I passed a small park where a group of young girls was gathered around a science demonstration, their faces alight with curiosity and potential. I paused to watch for a moment, thinking about paths taken and not taken, about the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we deserve. My phone buzzed with a reminder about tomorrow's mentoring session with Sonia and the other entrepreneurs in our first cohort. Women who, like me, had been told explicitly or implicitly that their ideas weren't valuable, their backgrounds were limitations, their ambitions were unrealistic. Women who, like me, had decided to build anyway. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from the daughter of working-class parents with big dreams, to a wife trying desperately to fit into a world that would never truly accept her, to a founder and CEO creating opportunities for others like her. It hadn't been about proving the Bradfords wrong, though that had happened along the way. It had been about proving myself right. About honoring the vision I'd had when everyone else dismissed it. About valuing my own worth when others couldn't or wouldn't see it. As I entered the restaurant, seeing the women who would benefit from our foundation already gathered and talking excitedly, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This was exactly where I was meant to be. I took out my phone and finally responded to Richard's text. Thank you. I hope you find your path. The view is better when you forge it yourself. Then I put my phone away and stepped forward to meet the future I'd built, not despite where I came from, but because of it. Not to prove my worth to others, but because I'd finally, fully recognized it myself. 1 year after the foundation launch, I stood at the podium in a packed auditorium, preparing to introduce our first graduating cohort of entrepreneurs. The room buzzed with energy. Investors, press, mentors, and supporters all gathered to witness what these 10 remarkable women had built. When we started the Emma Carter Foundation, we had a simple vision: to find women with brilliant ideas who lacked only opportunity and resources, not talent or determination. From the front row, Sonia beamed up at me, her healthcare communication platform already in beta testing with 3 major hospitals. Beside her sat the other 9 women we'd supported, each with her own journey, her own innovation that was already beginning to reshape her industry. Today, these 10 founders will present businesses that together are valued at over $40 million, I continued. But their true value can't be measured in dollars. It's measured in lives improved, problems solved, and barriers broken. As I introduced each woman, I thought about how far we'd all come. FinStep had recently crossed the billion-dollar valuation mark, a milestone that had once seemed impossibly distant. More importantly, we were now serving over 250,000 small businesses, many of whom had previously been locked out of sophisticated financial tools. After the presentations, during the reception, I found myself surrounded by well-wishers and potential investors eager to connect with our entrepreneurs. I was speaking with a venture capitalist about Sonia's platform when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to find Richard Bradford standing there, looking both familiar and changed. His designer suit was gone, replaced by a simple button-down and jeans. His carefully styled hair was longer now, more relaxed. But the biggest difference was in his eyes. Clearer, more present than I'd ever seen them. "Emma," he said quietly. "I hope I'm not intruding." For a moment, I wasn't sure how to respond. The last time we'd seen each other had been in that courtroom, over a year ago. "Not at all," I finally said. "It's good to see you, Richard." The venture capitalist tactfully excused himself, leaving us standing alone in the crowded room. "I wanted to congratulate you," Richard said. "Not just on the foundation, but on everything. FinStep, the billionaire status." He smiled slightly, though I know that's not what drives you. "Thank you," I replied, genuinely surprised by his presence. "Elizabeth mentioned you've started your own venture." He nodded. "Sustainable housing solutions. We're small, but growing. Nothing compared to what you've built, but it's mine. Really mine. For the first time." There was a quiet pride in his voice that I'd never heard before. Not the borrowed confidence of the Bradford name, but something earned through his own efforts. "That's wonderful," I said, meaning it. "How did William take it?" Richard's expression grew more serious. "About as well as you'd expect. Cut me off completely. Said I was throwing away generations of legacy for a pipe dream. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. So you understand now," I said softly. "What it's like to build something that matters more than approval." "Yes." He glanced around the room at the celebrating entrepreneurs, though I had a better example to follow than most. Before I could respond, Layla appeared at my side, her expression curious as she recognized Richard. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but the Forbes reporter is ready for your interview whenever you are." I nodded, turning back to Richard. "I should go, of course," he said quickly. "I just wanted to stop by. To see this," he gestured around the room, "and to tell you that you were right. About all of it." As I walked away, I felt a strange sense of completion. Not because I needed his validation, but because, in some small way, my journey had helped him find his own path too. The Forbes interview took place in a quiet corner of the venue. The reporter eager to discuss not just FinStep's remarkable growth, but the foundation's impact as well. "You've created quite a stir in both the tech and philanthropic worlds," she noted. "What drives you to focus on women from working-class backgrounds specifically?" I thought about my answer carefully. When I was starting out, the biggest barriers I faced weren't just about being a woman in tech. They were about being a woman without connections, without family wealth, without the right last name or pedigree. The reporter nodded, taking notes. "And now you have the resources to change that landscape." "We do," I agreed. "But more importantly, we're proving that talent and innovation aren't confined to certain zip codes or family trees. The women we support aren't charity cases. They're brilliant founders who simply needed what privileged entrepreneurs take for granted: access to capital, networks, and mentorship." After the interview, as the event began winding down, I found Sonia talking animatedly with a group of hospital administrators interested in her platform. "Emma!" she exclaimed when she saw me. "These gentlemen want to pilot the program in their entire hospital system." I congratulated her, watching as she expertly navigated the conversation. Confident, articulate, and completely in her element. A year ago, she'd been brilliant but hesitant, unsure if she belonged in these rooms. Now she owned them. Back at my apartment that evening, I kicked off my heels and settled onto the balcony with a glass of wine. The city lights twinkled below, a visual reminder of all the lives and stories playing out simultaneously. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Saw the event coverage online. So proud of you, kiddo. Your mother's already planning what to wear to next year's graduation." I smiled, typing back a quick reply. My parents had fully embraced their roles as foundation board members, bringing perspectives that our more traditionally credentialed members couldn't offer. My mother's insights on healthcare access had directly shaped Sonia's platform development. My father's experience in the trades had informed another entrepreneur's construction safety innovation. As I set my phone down, I noticed an email notification from an unfamiliar address. Opening it, I was surprised to find a message from William Bradford. "Emma, I don't expect a response to this email. After our last interaction, I wouldn't blame you for deleting it unread. But some things need to be said, even if only to clear one's own conscience. I was wrong about you. Catastrophically, inexcusably wrong. Not just about your business acumen, which is clearly exceptional, but about your character and worth as a person. When Richard left the family business, I was furious. I blamed you for poisoning his mind against his birthright. But as the months passed, I've had to face an uncomfortable truth. You didn't turn him away from our world. You simply showed him there were other possibilities. He's building something meaningful now, something that helps people. For the first time in his life, I see genuine purpose in his eyes, rather than the desire to please me. It's taken me too long to recognize the value in that. Eleanor tells me she visited you some months ago. That was her own initiative, though I support it wholeheartedly now. The donation to your foundation was also her idea, but I've since reviewed the work you're doing. It's impressive, necessary, the kind of innovation our city, our country needs. I won't ask for forgiveness. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. But I wanted you to know that an old man can still learn, even if the lessons come too late. Respectfully, William Bradford. I read the email twice, processing its unexpected humility. William Bradford, the man who had dismissed me as trash, was acknowledging not just my success but his own failure to see my worth. It wasn't an attempt to reconnect or repair what had been broken. We were both well beyond that point. It was simply an acknowledgement of truth, perhaps as much for his own peace as for mine. I closed the email without responding. Some chapters didn't need further words to reach their conclusion. The next morning, I arrived at the office early to find Layla already there, reviewing applications for our next cohort of entrepreneurs. "These are even stronger than last year's," she said, handing me a stack of files. "Word is spreading about what we're doing." I flipped through the applications. Women from across the country with innovations in healthcare, education, sustainable energy, and more. Each one brilliant, each one overlooked by traditional funding sources. "We need to expand," I decided. "Double the cohort size for next year." Layla's eyes widened. "That's ambitious." "So are they," I replied, gesturing to the applications. "And we have the resources now." As we began planning the expansion, my phone rang with an unexpected call. Elizabeth Bradford, calling from Austin. "Emma, have you seen it?" she asked excitedly when I answered. "Seen what?" "The Time 100 list. You're on it, under the Innovators section." I hadn't seen it, but within minutes my phone was flooding with congratulatory messages and media requests. Time magazine had named me one of the 100 most influential people of the year, citing both FinStep's revolutionary approach to financial inclusion and the foundation's work supporting underrepresented entrepreneurs. The accompanying profile had been written by an unexpected source, a renowned tech CEO who had once dismissed my early pitches as cute and niche. Emma Carter didn't just build a billion-dollar company, he'd written, "She's redefining who gets to build the future." In doing so, she's not just changing individual lives, she's changing the innovation landscape itself. The recognition was gratifying, but what struck me most was how different it felt from the validation I'd once craved from the Bradfords. This wasn't about being accepted into someone else's world. It was about being recognized for creating my own. That evening, the foundation team organized an impromptu celebration at our office. As champagne flowed and congratulations echoed, I found myself drawn to the large windows overlooking the city. The same view that had once symbolized possibility now represented achievement, not just mine, but that of every woman we'd supported. My assistant approached with a small package that had just been delivered. "This came for you," she said, hand-delivered by courier. Inside was a small, elegantly wrapped box, and a note from Eleanor Bradford, a token of respect for a remarkable journey. E.B. The box contained a pair of diamond earrings, tasteful, expensive, and utterly unlike anything I would choose for myself. I smiled at the well-intentioned gesture. Eleanor was trying, in her way, to bridge a gap that couldn't really be crossed. We were simply too different. our values too divergent. But her effort represented something important, a recognition that worth wasn't determined by pedigree or connections. I slipped the earrings back into their box and returned to the celebration, where Sonia was raising a toast. To Emma, she said, lifting her glass, who saw value where others saw nothing, who built opportunity where others built walls, and who taught us all that the only validation that matters is the one we give ourselves. The room erupted in cheers, and I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. This moment, these women, this purpose, was the true measure of success. Not magazine covers or billion-dollar valuations, but impact, change, transformation. 2 days later, I was preparing for a series of media interviews when my phone rang with a call from Richard. "I saw the Time 100 announcement," he said. "Congratulations." "Thank you," I replied. "How's your venture going?" "Growing," he said. "We just secured our first major contract. Affordable, sustainable housing for a community that was displaced by last year's floods." "That's fantastic, Richard." There was a pause before he continued. "I was hoping we could meet." "Not about us," he added quickly. "That chapter is closed for both of us, I think. But I'd like to discuss a potential collaboration between our companies. Your financial tools could help the families we're building for." I considered his proposal. A year ago, the idea of working with Richard would have been unthinkable. But we were different people now, both clearer about who we were and what mattered to us. "Send me the details," I said. "I'll have my team look into it." After we hung up, I opened my calendar to find it packed with meetings, interviews, and strategic planning sessions. FinStep was expanding globally. The foundation was doubling its reach. My life was full in ways I could never have imagined when I sat at that Bradford dinner table. Being called trash. That evening, I kept a standing appointment that had become sacred to me: dinner with Sonia and the other entrepreneurs from our first cohort. Once a month, we gathered not as founder and mentees, but as peers and friends, sharing challenges, celebrating victories, and supporting each other through the inevitable ups and downs of the entrepreneurial journey. As we settled around the table at our favorite restaurant, I looked at these women who had become family, brilliant, determined, unstoppable in their vision. Each building something that would change lives. Each finding her own path to success, without compromising who she was or where she came from. "Before we order," I said, raising my glass, "I want to toast all of you. Not for your companies, valuations, or your press coverage, though those are impressive, but for the courage it takes to build something new in a world that often doesn't make space for voices like ours." Sonia smiled. "We learned that from you, Emma. To make our own space when none is offered." As dinner progressed, the conversation flowed from business challenges to personal triumphs, from technical innovations to life lessons. These women understood, as few others could, the journey I'd traveled, not just the professional milestones, but the personal reckonings, the hard-won confidence, the discovery of worth that came from within rather than external validation. Later that night, back home, I stood on my balcony looking out at the city lights. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Just saw your interview online. You mentioned something your old man used to say about building your own door, if no one opens one for you." Made me proud. I smiled, remembering all the times his quiet wisdom had guided me, even when I didn't fully understand it. The Bradford name had once seemed like a key to doors I couldn't open on my own. Now I understood that the most meaningful doors were the ones we built ourselves. My journey had come full circle. From being called trash by a family whose approval I'd once craved, to building a billion-dollar company and a foundation that was changing lives. From doubting my own worth to recognizing that value isn't something others bestow upon us, it's something we claim for ourselves. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find a young woman waiting nervously in the reception area. My assistant explained she was a college student who'd read about the foundation and wanted to talk about her idea for an educational app. "I know I don't have an appointment," the young woman said apologetically when I approached, "and I'm not even in your foundation program yet, but I just wanted to meet you, to tell you that seeing your story changed everything for me." I invited her into my office, listening as she passionately described her vision for an app that would make advanced math and science concepts accessible to students in underserved schools. Her idea was rough but promising: her enthusiasm infectious. "Everyone told me to be realistic," she explained, "that girls from my neighborhood don't build tech companies. Then I read about you, about how you built Finstep when everyone said you couldn't. And I thought, why not me too?" As she spoke, I saw myself in her, the determination, the vision, the refusal to be limited by others' perceptions. This was my true legacy. Not just the company or the foundation, but every person who looked at their own dreams differently because they'd seen what was possible. "Let me introduce you to our foundation team," I said when she'd finished. "I think you might be perfect for our next cohort." Her eyes widened. "Really? Just like that?" I smiled. "The first step is always the hardest, believing you belong in rooms like this one. You've already taken that step. The rest is just details." As I walked her to meet with our program director, I thought about all the turns my life had taken to bring me to this moment. The dismissal that had once wounded me so deeply had ultimately set me free, to build something greater than I'd imagined, to claim a worth that no one could diminish, to create opportunities for others who, like me, had been underestimated and overlooked. My husband's family had called me trash, but in doing so, they'd inadvertently pushed me to prove something I now understood in my bones: that our value isn't determined by those who fail to see it. It's determined by what we build, who we lift, and the legacy we create. And that legacy was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.